So thank you all for being here this morning. This is another Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority Abatement Academy webinar. This is one specifically for cities and counties. And it's called Turning Your OAA Grant Award into Impact Grants Management Next Steps for Cities and Counties. We put this together based on feedback that we've heard of things that can use some additional guidance and clarification, and also because in this for the next the round of awards for fiscal year 27 that the grants committee will take up next month. There's a timeline for acceptance. We've also, in doing some annual report reviews, have seen some things that could be improved by some areas for subrecipient monitoring, and so we wanted to provide some guidance on that and give you all something to be able to work with from there. This session is being recorded, and when the recording is done, it will be posted on our website on the Abatement Academy page, along with the slide deck, which can also serve as a guide and resource. We also are timed this, even though we are quite underwater with 157 applications from cities and counties across the Commonwealth, to review and make recommendations. We wanted to make sure this got out before awards were made and award packages started coming through next month, so people have some time to prepare. Next slide. So, for those that don't know me, I am Charlie Linticum. I am the Director of Operations for the Opioid Abatement Authority, which means I oversee all of the grant programs from soup to nuts and everything in between. And I also oversee the team of local government opioid liaisons, opioid settlement liaisons that are based throughout the state that are resources to you all in your applications and reporting. Also, here, and the person that put this wonderful slide deck together in this program is Sharika Bridges, OAA Senior Manager for Grant Operations. She'll be walking us through most of the presentation, and I will hand off to her after we go through the agenda. So, for what we're going to cover today, we're going to look at the OAA's grant phases and the award phases as checklists. Make sure that everybody's aware about the biggest update to our terms and conditions that starts with awards that are made beginning with July 1 of 2027, which has to do primarily with a timeline for things to be accepted and contingencies to be met. Going to have some tips to avoid common mistakes and issues that we often see, things that tend to hold people up process-wise on their side from getting things done that a little planning can help with. Going to review are the separate accounting requirements, which has been in place since OAA started and is even more specifically with more guidance spelled out in our terms and conditions now. We'll talk about fiscal agent responsibilities. Really, anyone that is directly receiving a grant is considered a fiscal agent, but this is primarily focused for cooperative partnerships of multiple cities and counties, and for the particular city or county that has been designated as the fiscal agent for the award. I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about subrecipient monitoring. That's making sure that there are agreements in place and regular check-ins and reporting and compliance for those entities that money is being provided to as part of the award. I'm going to look at how to maintain programmatic and financial compliance. Talk briefly about upcoming OAA operational reviews, how to connect with the OAA, and leave some time at the end for any questions. If you have questions as we go, you're welcome to type them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll address them. If we can address them as we go, that's fine. If not, we'll just hold them until the end. And with that, I'm turning it over to Sharika.
Thank you, Charlie. Good morning, everyone. So the first thing we will talk about are the different OAA grant phases. So the OAA grant phases start with phase one, which is also referred to as the pre-award phase. This is the phase where cities and counties prepare to submit their grant application. You do any planning, any communications with any subrecipient or organizations that may have a role on the project. And then ultimately, this pre-award phase ends with your application submission. So just to kind of put it into context as it relates to the FY 2027 grant phases, the pre-award phase was the phase that cities and counties most recently completed. So for new applications, those were due March 16th of 2026. And then the renewal applications were due April 1st of 2026. So you all have typically already completed that pre-award phase. Currently, we are in between phases one and two. So the OAA is currently in the process of reviewing applications and making recommendations to our grants committee in terms of FY 27 awards. And so we are kind of in between both phase, the pre-award phase and the award phase. One thing I do want to mention as it relates to kind of where we are in the process. So the OAA will issue a press release after June 15th, next month, announcing all FY 2027 awards to cities and counties. However, OAA staff will be communicating with localities regarding OAA recommendations to the grants committee for FY 27 awards, and that communication will take place on or around June 8th of 2026. So as we are shifting gears from phase one, the pre-award phase, into the award phase, we want to reiterate kind of what that award phase looks like and what responsibilities, actions, requirements are to be completed as a part of the award phase. So once your city or county has been notified that your project has been awarded for FY 2027, you will receive an award package from the OAA. That award package will be issued through the OAA's grants portal. And once you receive notification that your project has been awarded, you've received an alert from the portal indicating that the award package is available and ready for your review. We ask that you go through that award package, review it, and you will initiate the e-signature process, which is the formal process of accepting the OAA award. And so through that process, you would have to review your award package and then send the award package to your city or county executive through the grants portal for them to actually execute or e-sign the award package. During the award phase, you will also in your award package see any contingency requirements, and that is the process as well. This is the phase as well where you will execute any required contingency documents and submit those to the OAA for our records as a part of the award, accepting the award. So once you've gotten your award package e-signed, you've submitted all of your required contingency documents, then we shift from the award phase over into the active award and management phase. That is where you're actually doing the work on the grant. You're actually spending the funds, you're tracking your performance measures, you're doing any progress reporting required from the OAA. You're maintaining both your programmatic and your financial compliance. Annual reporting will be done as a part of phase three as well. You're looking at your project objectives and how they align with your proposed timeline. And then this phase three is also where the OAA could potentially reach out for operational reviews or any other parts of the closeout process. So again, because we are in the middle of the pre-award phase and the award phase, we wanted to provide some guidance and a checklist of different things that you need to keep in mind as we're moving over into the award phase within the next probably 2, 3 weeks. And so the main thing that we want to reiterate is with the OAA currently being in our internal review process of the FY 27 applications and in our process of making recommendations for FY 2027 awards to our grants committee, we may reach out for clarifications or communications to cities and counties. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing and replying to our communications, and those communications are typically done through the OAA grants portal. So if we do reach out to you, you will receive an email notification that you have a message in the grants portal, and we ask that you review that correspondence and reply to us within a timely manner. The second thing to keep in mind is if your application is approved for award, the first thing you should do is log into the OAA Grants portal. We ask that you review your award package because that award package includes a lot of important information, such as any awarded funds that you may have, any approved matching funds. It includes your project's period of performance. It also includes your OAA grant award number, your any award contingencies that you're required to provide. It also has your performance measures, and then ultimately it has the OAA award terms and conditions included in that award package. As you're reviewing your award package and going through the process to ensure that everything looks good so that you can send it to your city or county executive, if you notice any discrepancies in the award package, we ask that you reach out to us immediately so that we can evaluate that and determine if any corrections are needed to the award package and go on and get those corrections made so that we can, get that process completed as quickly as possible for you. The third thing is, again, we just want to reiterate, once you've received your award package in the portal, you've reviewed it, you've confirmed that everything looks correct, there are no issues, we ask that you go on and send the award package to your city or county executive for e-signature. Again, that process has to be initiated through the OAA grants portal. And to Charlie's point about our updated terms and conditions, this requirement will be time sensitive for FY 2027 awards. This process also want to reiterate, you will need to initiate sending it to your city or county executive through the portal, but they will receive an Adobe e-sign email and they will execute the award package based on the link provided in the email that they receive. As you're working through this process, if you notice any issues or if they alert you they haven't received the email, please reach out to us so that we can evaluate what's going on and we may need to make some corrections or help assist with that process. The fourth thing that you want to take into consideration as a part of the award phase, you may be required to upload and submit required contingency documents. That could be inclusive of, but not limited to, an operational agreement. Typically, that's required for new cooperative partnership awards. All cities and counties that will receive OAA funds are required to submit a Virginia W-9 form. So we want to reiterate, not the federal W-9, but a Virginia W-9 form. And you can download that template from the portal. You may also, for renewal projects, you may have a contingency where you have to provide documentation. If you have carry forward that is approved, you have to provide documentation that you've encumbered at least 80% of your carry forward amount. Make sure you're mindful of that and providing that documentation so that we can transmit your new year funds. And then for projects that have subrecipients, vendors, contractors, you may be required to provide some type of written agreement, whether it's a contract or a memorandum of understanding as a part of the contingency requirement. All of the contingencies are required to be uploaded through the OAA grants portal. And then we want to stress again, based on the OAA's updated terms and conditions for FY 27 awards, this requirement is time sensitive. Once you have your city or county has formally e-signed and accepted the award, you've provided all your contingency documents, the project will then move into the active award and management phase. So we've done a little bit of talking about the OAA's updated terms and conditions, and we just want to reiterate that those award terms and conditions have been updated. So we want to stress that you review those updated terms and conditions in their entirety as you're going through the review of your award package process. These updates may affect your responsibilities as grant recipient or fiscal agent. So definitely make sure you're aware of the terms and conditions, you know what they are, and you have those readily accessible for you to review at any time. And then we want to stress that by accepting or e-signing the award package, your city or county is acknowledging and agreeing to abide by the OAA's updated award terms and conditions. So we recently held an Abatement Academy webinar where Charlie was able to kind of detail what those updates to the terms and conditions are. And so this slide deck will be posted on the OAA's website under the Abatement Academy section. And there are hyperlinks to help direct you not only to the slide deck, but to the webinar recording where Charlie outlined those updated terms and conditions. So we definitely recommend, if you haven't done so already, to review that information as well. And then moving over into some tips to avoid common mistakes or issues for OAA grants. So we've talked a lot about you've been notified that your project has been awarded. You need to go review the award package, and then you will have to, if everything looks good, you'll have to send the award package for e-signature to your city or county executive. We want to stress that you do not have to wait to send the award package for e-signature. So you may have some contingency requirements that may take a little time, like you may need to execute an MOU or a contract, and there may be a little bit of a delay in doing that, but that does not mean that you have to wait to send your award package for e-signature. We actually recommend doing the opposite. So as soon as you're able to confirm that the award package looks correct and everything is fine, we recommend going on and sending that award package to your city or county executive so that they can formally accept the award. Again, we want to stress, based on the updated terms and conditions for OA awards, this process is time sensitive, so try to do this as soon as possible. The second thing is for projects that have subrecipients, the OA recommends that the fiscal agent, cities or counties meet with those subrecipients on a monthly basis or at a minimum on a quarterly basis. You want to make sure that your subrecipients are in constant communication with you. You understand their progress on the grant. They understand grant requirements, the terms and conditions, all of those things. You want to make sure that there is frequent and open dialogue between the fiscal agent, city and county, and the subrecipients. The subrecipients should be frequently reporting on their expenditures, any performance measures that they're tracking or they've achieved, and just overall the status of the project objectives and the progress on the grant. They should be communicating that frequently with the fiscal agent, city or county. The third thing the OAA recommends is that fiscal agents, cities, and counties provide funding to subrecipients on a reimbursement basis as opposed to a lump sum payment. So this allows the fiscal agent, city, or county to continuously monitor the financial and programmatic compliance of the subrecipient. And we want to stress that as a fiscal agent of an OAA award, the fiscal agent is responsible for overall compliance of the grant, not the sub. The sub still has to maintain compliance, but the fiscal agent is the one that has formally accepted the award, and it is their award, so they have to monitor all partners and all progress and compliance on the grant. The fourth thing that we want to reiterate is the project's period of performance for OAA grants typically runs through July 1st, from July 1st to June 30th annually. The OAA awards grants at 1 year at a time. So even if you are eligible for some additional renewals following your first year of award, the awards are typically 1 year at a time, which is why you have to submit renewals for those additional years following the first year of an OAA award. For the fiscal year 2027 awards, the period of performance will span from July 1st of 2026 through June 30th of 2027. And so we want to provide a little bit of information as it relates to your spending and how it aligns with the grant's period of performance. So for FY27 projects, no expenses should be incurred prior to July 1st because July 1st, 2026 is the first day, the start date of the period of performance. And then no expenses should be incurred after June 30th of 2027. Now, we do know that sometimes there may be things that delays in processing expenses. And so if that is the case for all FY 2027 expenses, they should be at least encumbered by June 30th of 2027. And based on the terms and conditions of OAA awards, you have a 90-day liquidation period where you will actually pay out those encumbered expenses. And so you'll have until September 30th to liquidate those encumbered FY 2027 expenses. And then the last thing we want to reiterate that cities and counties will be required. So if you're awarded an FY 2027 award, you'll be required to submit an FY 2027 annual report, and that will take place October 1st of 2027. Now, we do have a lot of cities and counties that have active FY 26 awards, and for those FY 26 awards, the period of performance ends June 30th of this year, so next month. And for those cities and counties, they will be required to submit an FY 26 annual report, and that will be due October 1st of this year. But for any FY 27 awards, those will be due next October, so October of 2027. For fiscal agent cities and counties that have subrecipients or even with cooperative partnerships, you have other partner localities. Fiscal agents should monitor subrecipient expenses, but for the sake of annual reporting, we're asking for expenses of the fiscal agent, city or county, or any partner cities or counties that may have matching funds to a cooperative partnership project. And so for that, we recommend, even if your subrecipient will be having a role in completing the reporting and all of that, making sure that what you're reporting is the report of the fiscal agent or the awardee city or county, and that you're coordinating with your city or county's finance, accounting, or budget office to ensure that your expenses and everything are reported accurately. So moving over to discuss the separate accounting requirements. So OAA award recipients or cities and counties must maintain separate accounting of each funding source that is a part of an OAA award or each revenue source. And so with a lot of our projects, there are a combination of non-OAA matching funds. There could be some OAA matching funds, and then for cooperative partnership projects, there could be some cooperative partnership or competitive funds. And so we wanted to kind of break this out to show you that the separate accounting requirement requires you to keep each funding source separate within your accounting system so that you can track any expenses to those different revenue streams. And so that would be your direct distribution. If you have any direct distribution funds, those are considered non-OAA, and you would have to track expenses against that particular funding source separate from your individual distribution if matching funds or awarded funds or compared to gold standard and cooperative. One thing I do want to clarify is not only should you track non-OAA funds separate from OAA funds, but you should also be tracking the different buckets of OAA funds as well. So you should not have your individual distribution, your gold standard, if you have any, and cooperative funds. They should not all be in one bucket. They should also be tracked separately, even though they're all considered OAA funds. And just to reiterate, as a part of this requirement, the OAA doesn't prescribe a specific methodology for maintaining separate accounting. However, whatever method your city or county chooses to use, you must be able to reconcile your expenses with the city and county's general ledger. And you also will need to be able to have detailed information on the usage of each funding source as it relates to each of your OAA projects. That is another piece to it as well. For anyone that has multiple OAA projects, you should have all of those projects separate. So all of your revenue and expenses by the different funding types separate for each separate project. And shifting a little to talk about fiscal agent or city or county awardee responsibilities. So we want to reiterate that the fiscal agent, city or county is responsible for coordinating and executing an operational agreement for all partner cities and counties on cooperative partnership projects. And this is typically something that is required for new projects. There may be instances where renewal cooperative partnerships will require an updated operational agreement, typically in instances if you're adding a new partner city or county or things of that nature. The fiscal agent is also responsible for all aspects of the project. That includes, but it's not limited to, coordinating and obtaining information from partner cities and counties, subrecipient monitoring, executing any contracts or written agreements with vendors or contractors, and meeting application and reporting requirements. The fiscal agent must also ensure any funds received from partner cities and counties or any subrecipient organizations must ensure that those funds are separately accounted for by funding source and by project. The fiscal agent should also ensure that awarded funds and any contingent matching funds are spent based on the sequence listed here. So typically the sequence consists of spending non-OAA funds first. So that could be direct distribution matching funds or any other non-OAA source of matching funds for the project. Then you would spend individual distribution and gold standard funds, and then ultimately for cooperative partnership projects, those cooperative or competitive funds should be spent last. The fiscal agent is also responsible for ensuring any amendments and renewal applications, as well as any required reports, are completed accurately and submitted to the OAA by the due date that we prescribe. And so these are just breaking out some of those responsibilities related to the fiscal agent role. So now we're going to dig a little deeper into subrecipient monitoring. And so for this piece, the OAA recognizes that many OAA funded projects have subrecipients that have a role in implementing those projects. Those subrecipients could be your CSB or health district or some other non-governmental organization or entity. So for this, the fiscal agent, city or county, if there is a subrecipient on a project, the OAA will typically indicate a contingency where the fiscal agent, city or county must provide a fully executed written agreement. That could be an MOU or some other formal agreement between the fiscal agent and the project subrecipients. In this context, again, we want to stress that the subrecipient is typically an organization or entity that receives OAA funding, but they receive it through the awardee fiscal agent, city or county. So they're not a direct recipient of OAA funds. So the funds will flow from the OAA to the fiscal agent, city or county, and then to the subrecipient. While the subrecipient typically will play a defined role in implementing the project, we want to stress that subrecipients are categorized as organizations that do not have a direct funding relationship with the OAA. So the OAA does not provide funding directly to that organization. The funds have to pass through the fiscal agent, city, or county to the subrecipient. As a subrecipient on an OAA funded project, they're required to report to the fiscal agent, city, or county to ensure that their use of OAA funding complies with the OAA award term and conditions and other requirements that the OAA prescribe. One subrecipient monitoring tip that we would like to provide is to ensure that your subs remain compliant. The OAA recommends that fiscal agents, cities, or counties engage in something called subrecipient monitoring. That's a process through which the fiscal agent, city, or county will oversee and evaluate the different activities, the spending, the compliance of the sub who receive all or a part of the city or county's OAA award grant funds. By conducting subrecipient monitoring, the fiscal agent, city, or county can continuously assess the risk of noncompliance, fund mismanagement, or underperformance by the sub and determine whether there is any additional corrective actions or safeguards are needed to ensure that that subrecipient is compliant with the OAA grant award terms and conditions. The fiscal agent, city, or county should also clearly define the subrecipient's responsibilities, their role on the project, and that can be inclusive of reporting requirements, any internal controls that the fiscal agent, city, or county wants to place on their subs. And then also make sure that you're collaborating and communicating with the subrecipient. Make sure that the subrecipient has a detailed copy of their budget so they know exactly what their portion of the funds are to be spent on. And make sure that they are able to track how exactly they're expending the portion of OAA funds they've received, and they're reporting that back to the fiscal agent, city, or county. Another OAA tip as it relates to subrecipient monitoring. So during the application process, we understand and recognize that subrecipients may be granted access to the fiscal agent, city, or county's OAA grants portal account. And that access is at the discretion of the fiscal agent, city, or county. We typically don't have a problem with that. We understand how that works and the necessity for that. However, we do want to recommend that fiscal agents do not rely solely on your subrecipients to complete your renewal applications. Make sure that you're going in and you're reviewing the information that's being completed. Make sure the information is accurate. Make sure the expenses reported reconcile to your city or county's records and your ledger and those type of things. We also want to reiterate this is important for not just your renewal applications, but also your annual reporting and also any other grant obligations that are required as a part of being an OAA grant awardee. The fiscal agent, city, or counties shall also actively coordinate with your finance or your budget or your accounting office, again, to make sure any financial information you're reporting, whether it's through the annual report or your renewal applications, to make sure your records are as accurate as possible. If you have a subrecipient on your OAA project, again, we want to stress the importance of holding regular meetings with those subs, at a minimum, meeting with them quarterly. And that gives you an opportunity to continuously assess programmatic and financial progress on the project. During those meetings, we recommend communicating key information such as reporting deadlines. So maybe you have an annual report coming up. You want to make them aware of it. Don't wait until the last minute. Make them aware of it so that they can pull information that you may need to complete the annual report or whatever other OAA required action that is needed. During your subrecipient monitoring meetings, you also want to make sure that you're communicating with the subrecipient regarding any performance measure benchmarks. You also want to be reviewing the subrecipient's expenses, so having the subrecipient's approved budget and then looking and comparing their actual expenses against the approved budget to make sure cost allowability is being followed and compliance as it relates to expenses as well. Another tip as you are working through any contingency requirements. So again, if you have a subrecipient on an OAA funded project, typically we will require a written agreement or an MOU between the fiscal agent and the subrecipient. We recommend in that written agreement outlining the things listed. So if there's any important OAA reporting deadlines, outline that in your agreement. If the subrecipient is responsible for meeting any performance measures, so whether they may have a role, they're providing services, and they're required to track and report to you on performance measures achieved, make sure you have that information in your written agreement. You also want to include again the subrecipient's approved budget by line with line item expenses so that they know exactly what their budget looks like and they can go and compare their expenses and make sure that they're spending the money in accordance with the approved budget. So make sure your written agreements between your city or county and your subrecipients reflect all of that information so everyone's on the same page and there are no surprises. You also want to make sure, as the fiscal agent, city or county, that you're maintaining comprehensive records. So again, we mentioned earlier, if you have a subrecipient on the project, we recommend providing funding from the city or county to the sub on sort of a reimbursement basis, if you have capacity to do that. And you want to maintain comprehensive records. So if it's a reimbursement structure where you're paying your subrecipient, they will be invoicing you, and then you can pay them, reimburse them based on those invoices. Make sure you're keeping records such as those invoices, if you have any purchase orders, if they're completing any information for you as a part of reporting requirements. Make sure that you're keeping accurate documentation of all of those records. And then if you are the fiscal agent, city or county, and you notice that there are some concerns around subrecipient noncompliance, we ask that you report and communicate that to the OAA promptly so that we can discuss and evaluate. And ultimately, we're happy to support you as you're monitoring your subrecipients, happy to offer guidance and support through that process to help ensure that the subrecipient maintains compliance as well. So shifting from subrecipient monitoring to talking about compliance. And so first we want to talk about just provide some guidance on maintaining programmatic compliance for OAA grants. So the first thing, again, we want to stress understanding your award package and your award grant terms and conditions. Immediately following a notice that your project has been awarded, you want to review your grant award package, your terms and conditions, and any other documentation related to your OAA grant award. You want to understand what's allowable versus what are unallowable costs and make sure that you're spending your funds based on the OAA approved budget for the grant. You also want to be familiar with any reporting requirements. So again, the big one is the annual reports that are due following the end of each grant's period of performance. So make sure you're familiar with that and you have that on the calendar. You also want to make sure that you're looking and you're aware of your performance measures, your objectives, and also how your objectives align with your project timeline. We recommend keeping a compliance checklist based on the OAA grant terms and conditions, and based on the approved grant requirements. That just kind of helps to keep you on track and aware of what your responsibilities and requirements are. We also recommend, again, maintaining detailed records, keeping records of all grant related activities, keep a record of your funding applications, keep documentation related to your expenses or any reports that you submit, and then ultimately keep documentation for any other decisions. Sometimes you may have to submit a budget change request, and the OAA will evaluate that request and determine if it's allowable. And if it is, we will provide additional documentations for your records. So making sure you're keeping all of that for your records as it relates to the OAA grant. You also want to be sure that you're tracking your services delivered. You want to track participant outcomes and performance measures data. You also want to be able to provide additional clarification to the OAA if we requested on how you're tracking your performance measures. So make sure that you're able to provide clarification on that process and justify that process as well. You also want to maintain written policies and procedures within your city or county internally. And if there's a cooperative partnership, some of this will be listed in the operational agreement that's required for cooperative partnerships. But you want to maintain policies and procedures on how the program will be implemented and managed. The third thing is related to aligning your grant activities with your OAA approved scope of work. So you want to make sure you're only conducting activities that were approved as a part of the grant application and that align with the OAA approved project scope and budget. If your grant program needs to change direction, so maybe you need to modify your project scope or something of that nature, we ask that you reach out to us to communicate all the details surrounding that. We can evaluate that to determine if any additional approvals are needed through the grants committee or if we can administratively approve something. But you have to have prior written approval before actually implementing scope and budget changes. Again, we want to stress deviating from your approved scope without written permission from the OAA is considered non-compliant. So definitely make sure you're communicating that with us if that is something that is impacting your grant program. The fourth thing is related to tracking and reporting on performance measures. So again, you want to regularly monitor where your project performance measures and objectives are and what performance measures are being met and how you're tracking all of that. You want to submit timely and accurate reports to the OAA. You want to use data to identify any gaps that you may have as you're doing your annual report. Your achieved measures may differ from what was approved. We need to know why. So you want to make sure you are tracking that information and you're able to communicate those gaps to the OAA for our records so that we can evaluate that, and then we may need to have a separate discussion to try to figure out how to get the project back on track. We can offer some guidance and support. Again, you want to keep a calendar with all reporting deadlines, all things related to OAA requirements, so that you avoid missing them. And you want to communicate those deadlines to your subrecipients, any cooperative partners on the project. The final thing is related to following procurement and financial requirements. So you want to follow your locality's established procurement processes. Again, you want to keep receipts, invoices, and financial backup for every expense that's charged against the OAA grant because you will need that documentation and information as you're doing your annual report at the end of the after the grant's period of performance has ended. And then ultimately, don't guess with grant spending. So if you're unsure about your expenses on the grant, definitely collaborate and confirm things with your city or county's finance team. If you're unsure about things as it relates to your approved budget, if you have any questions, certainly reach out to someone on our team, whether it's your local liaison or reach out to the headquarters staff, and we'll be happy to provide clarification and assistance. So shifting from programmatic to financial compliance. So as the fiscal agent, city or county, you want to make sure you're understanding and agreeing that funds associated with OAA awards may only be used in compliance with the Code of Virginia. And they also have to follow any OAA regulations, guidance, and be in compliance with the OAA award terms and conditions. You also want to make sure your city or county, any partner cities or counties, or any partner subrecipient organizations, make sure that their primary mission does not conflict with the OAA's mission as it's defined by the Code of Virginia. As the fiscal agent, city or county, you also want to make sure that your city or county has the organizational, managerial, and financial capability to serve in that fiscal agent role and ensure proper planning, management, and completion or implementation of an OAA grant award. One other note as it relates to financial compliance with OAA grants. So for individual distribution awards, the awardee city or county has to ensure that those funds are spent in the sequence of items 1 through 4. So again, that consists of spending your non-OAA matching funds, whether that's direct distribution or some other form of non-OAA matching funds, then spending individual distribution and gold standard funds. For cooperative partnerships, you will follow sequence 1 through 5. So that would be non-OAA matching funds, whether it's direct distribution or any other source of non-OAA matching funds, then spending individual distribution matching funds, gold standard matching funds, and cooperative or competitive funds last. And so again, we want to note that the order does not remove the separate accounting requirement. So each one of these buckets, each one of these funding or revenue streams, sources should be tracked separately within your accounting system for your city or county. Next, we want to talk a little bit about OAA operational review. So, as a fiscal agent, city or county to an OAA award, you want to always be prepared for an OAA operational review. Based on the OAA's updated award terms and conditions, the OAA could reach out to the fiscal agent, city, or county to request a site visit, a desk audit, or some other type of operational review for OAA funded grant projects. To ensure that you're maintaining compliance with OAA reviews, cities and counties should maintain documentation of grant related information, such as your subrecipient monitoring meetings and any reports that the subs are providing to the fiscal agent. Maintain documentation related to project expenses, invoices, purchase copies, etc., making sure that your expenses are reconciled within your city or county general ledger, and make sure that your ledger shows a separation of accounting for all revenue sources and you're able to track expenses by each revenue source that is a part of the grant approved budget. Make sure you have documentation regarding the tracking and progress of any performance measures, and then also your objectives and your timeline for meeting your objectives. You also want to make sure you have written contracts. This is your procurement documentation or any other agreements. For cooperative partnership projects, make sure you have a copy of your operational agreement. As you're working through your project and getting towards the end of the period of performance and you're doing your reporting, make sure that you're archiving and keeping a record of your annual report documentation as well as your executed award packages. And then ultimately, as we talked about before, sometimes there may be requests for scope modifications or budget modifications. Make sure you maintain written documentation. If those requests are approved, the OAA will issue some type of written approval documentation for your records. Make sure you're keeping a copy of that documentation. We also want to stress that the mixing of OAA funds with other funds, or even the mixing of the different types of OAA funds into one bucket, is prohibited, and it could potentially result in a finding if we did a site visit, desk audit, or any other type of operational review. For fiscal agent cities or counties and project subrecipients and partner localities, anyone that's receiving OAA funds should maintain separate accounting and be able to have clearly identifiable cost centers within their accounting system to track all OAA grant related revenue streams and expenses. And we want to stress that this separation is required to ensure proper financial management. It helps facilitate audit readiness and it demonstrates compliance with the OAA's updated grant terms and conditions. So if you fail to maintain compliance with OAA grants, that could result in the OAA placing the project on a performance improvement plan as a corrective measure. Continued failed compliance could result in the OAA's termination of the grant award or the city or county being required to return funds to the OAA. And then it could ultimately impact the city or county's ability to apply for OAA grant funding in the future. So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page as it relates to compliance. And then we just want to remind you all of our structure and our local government opioid settlement liaison. So we have Miss Cindy Newman over in the Western region. We have Miss Kat Dupre in the Green Northern region. Miss Jenny Sawyer is over in the Eastern region. Miss Erica Tanner is in the central region, and then the OAA headquarters team typically handles the headquarters region. So as you are receiving correspondence, as we're announcing FY27 awards, please certainly feel free to reach out to your respective liaison or someone from the OAA team, and we'll be happy to answer any questions and support you through the process if your project is awarded an FY27 award. And now we will open it up for questions and a discussion.
Thank you so much, Sharika. Lots of information. Obviously, it's a lot to look at on the slides, but that's why we will be posting the slides along with the webinar recording online, so you all can download and keep a copy of it as a reference for things. So, if anyone has any questions, you can use the hand raise feature. You can ask in the meeting, or you can use the chat to type stuff out. I've also put a link to that webinar that Sharika referenced, where we go over the updates to the cities and county terms and conditions earlier this year. So, open for questions. Not seeing anything. Give it another second in case somebody's typing. But if I start to wrap up, that almost assures that we'll get one. So, appreciate everyone being here today. I said you should get an email as a registrant of this webinar when the recording is available. It'll also be on our website, and we'll include it in a news blast from our OAA newsletter. Also encourage you to send it along to any other your colleagues that work on OAA grants. We've also designed this to be like a kind of a quick OAA grants management 101 for people that maybe are coming in or new to dealing with these things as well. And if at any point you all have ideas or things that you maybe hope to hear today that you didn't, that might be good for other subjects, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to discuss and see what we can do. Um, there are no current additional Abatement Academy webinars scheduled as of now because of the conference, OAA's conference that's coming up. It was the Opioid Abatement Foundation, Virginia Opioid Abatement Foundation's conference, the Virginia Recovers Conference in Roanoke next month. After we get through that, sometime in the late summer, there'll be a schedule of things coming out for the fall. So, and it's just an FYI, the conference registration is sold out. So we have 400 attendees, along with numbers of sponsors and vendors and great speakers and things. So for any of you that are planning to attend, look forward to seeing you there and hope it goes well. All right. Thank you again, Sharika, for this massive effort, and appreciate everyone attending. And we'll talk to you all again soon.